Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about episode 4 of season 3 of Game of Thrones called And Now His Watch Is Ended. First, a quick apology for this review going out so late. Long story short, I was sick and then I ended up going out of town for a couple of days. Life happens. So anyway, overall, this is a really good episode. Lots of balls in the air as usual, but really just the ending scene with Dany really just makes this episode sing. It is fantastic. But anyway, let's make our usual rounds through our cast of characters. And we might as well start off with Jaime and Brienne. While I was watching all this stuff with going on with Jaime, I was reminded of the 5 stages of grief. And while this is normally used when somebody dies, it can also be used when someone suffers any sort of really significant loss. And obviously the significant loss here is Jaime losing his right hand. Now, it seems to me that Jaime sort of goes right to stage 4 of this, which is, despair, depression. He even says that he's busy dying. He doesn't really seem to want to live. That he says, "I was that hand." And Brienne, really is trying to give him a little bit of a kick in the pants to sort of, interestingly enough, revert him back to the second stage of grief, which is anger. She's saying, you have to live so that you can get revenge, which does seem to be the sort of thing that really would motivate Jaime. I mean, she even sort of really tries to push his buttons by calling him, saying, you're acting like a woman. And, given what Jaime had said in the previous episode about how he'd, rather die, if he was a woman, he'd rather die than be raped, well, that seems like a pretty good tactic to take. And it does seem to get through to him a bit. And it also is an opportunity for her to ask the really important question is, why did he help her? And, that is an interesting question. You can sort of, to me, the most basic case is that, Jaime Lannister is, at the end of the day, a serious bastard. But I can't imagine that even he is particularly in favor of women being gang raped. And I don't really think there's too much more to it than that. But still, some nice stuff there. It does show that these two characters are really well suited to bounce off of each other. And of course, this really does mark the transition for Jaime in terms of where his character goes next in the remainder of the story. I guess I should take a moment to remind everybody that I have read all the books, but it's been about 2 years since I've read any of them, and I've only read them all once. So if I forget anything, sorry. Also, I'm not going to spoil anything big from the books, but I am occasionally going to talk about some details and things like that, just for the sake of comparison. But again, no big spoilers. Alright, now, first of all, I absolutely love the way that Varys' story was done here in this episode. That was really my favorite scene with him in the entire series. And as best I can tell, a lot of what we hear is word for word from the books. Now, the reason that scene stuck with me so much is that's where it seems like I really seem to understand how magic works in the Song of Ice and Fire universe. And, this ain't D&D, folks. If you want to use magic in that universe, well, the old gods might have some power, but if you want to do magic, it seems like you have to really bargain in some way with these, H.P. Lovecraftian sort of critters. I mean, look at what stuff that Melisandre's done. That does not speak well of the Lord of Light, let's put it that way, especially since she uses that power to send out shadows to kill. So yeah, awesome performance there. Really makes Varys a much more rounded character. We understand why he is doing a lot of what he does, simply out of his hatred for magic. And this is important. Now, the stuff with the sorcerer. Now, that's just entirely for the show. That was not in the books. But I have to say, I did like that scene. It really reminds us that Varys, like a lot of people in the show, he does have that nasty side to him, and you don't want to get on it. Not really a whole lot to say about what's going on with Tyrion this episode. He's just mostly there to listen to Varys' story. But I do like the fact that he's still trying to get payback on Cersei for trying to have him killed. So, and I just like these two characters together. Varys and Tyrion are two characters that really play off each other well, and it's also really interesting to see Tyrion dealing with the people who are the closest things that he has to friends. Now, I also want to say, before we move on, that I really enjoyed the set design on the Sept, the little cathedral to the seven gods of Westeros. That was really just absolutely beautiful, beautiful stuff. I was extraordinarily impressed. And, really, this is one of those things, and maybe I'm being a little silly here, but just really amazed that they pulled this off on a TV budget. Now, granted, Game of Thrones has a pretty healthy budget for a TV show, but still, nonetheless. Also, here we get to see, Margaery further showing us that she knows how to play Joffrey, and she knows how to play him even better than Cersei did. And the fact that she can actually get Joffrey to go out there and wave to the crowd after he almost died at the hands of a mob, and the mob is actually mostly cheering for her, but not entirely, as best I can tell. So, that really does sort of speak well of Margaery's ability to manipulate people, which of course is well established. And of course, not long after that, she goes off and she's got Sansa dancing to her little tune, which, man, Sansa is like and she's just like the ultimate pawn in the Game of Thrones universe in so many ways. You just have to feel bad for her. Now, one thing, of course, is that here in the show, it's sort of promised that Sansa is going to have the chance to go off and marry Sir Loras, where in the books, it was more a case of, well, why don't you marry this cousin or brother or something of ours that has a bum leg? Sansa's like, yeah, okay, whatever, just get me the hell out of here. So, and seriously, it's just even the Tyrells are not above playing into Sansa's little romantic fantasies that even at this point she can't shake. So, I mean, that's one of the things that really is always there with Sansa's character. Is just like, Sansa freaking wake up. Now, granted, to be completely fair, Sansa does have her moments where she's breaking away from that, trying to become a little bit like, the manipulator, like Margaery and Cersei. But those moments are few and far between. Although, excuse me. Like I said, folks, I've been sick, and, well, it's been hanging around for 10 days. You have no idea at this point how sick of snot I am. But such is life. Anyway, I did like that, again, we've seen the scene with Varys and Ros. It's spelled out, for those people who may have forgotten or were wondering, just why Sansa is so darn important. And that is, it's even flat out stated. She's the key to the North if Robb dies. And given what's going on with Robb, might not be a bad idea to have a Stark as a backup plan. Anyway. So speaking of Margaery and manipulation, this seems like a decent way to segue into the really great scene between Cersei and her dad. And I absolutely love this scene because it really does address a lot of what's going on with Cersei and her dad. A lot of people who were coming from the books, there were a certain faction of folks who really seemed to be on Cersei's side, and saying, if her dad had just, trained her the way, or treated her the way he would have Jaime, Cersei would have been great, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, I never really agreed with that line of thinking. And what's great is that Tywin explicitly spells out exactly what I always thought of Cersei. and that is that she is not as smart as she thinks she is. And this is Cersei's great flaw in the series. If you pay attention to everything that happens to her, Cersei's a pretty good manipulator. She's just not as good at it as she thinks she does. Cersei's pretty smart. She's just not as smart as she thinks she is. And this continually blows up in her face. And her dad even makes it clear that he has always seen this flaw in her. And it explains so much about their relationship and, the way he treats her. And he even flat out says, I don't do this to you because you're female. I treat you this way because you're not as smart as you think you are. And, oh man, I don't know if I can exactly say vindication here, because honestly, that would just really be dumb and petty. I mean, at the end of the day, these are books and TV shows, not anything that actually really matters. But still, it's so perfectly crystallizes so much stuff from the books. And man, you gotta love Charles Dance in that scene. The man just brings it, and it is stupendous to watch. The guy's a fantastic actor. I love the dude. Now, let's see here. I suppose now it's time to briefly talk about good old Theon Greyjoy. And, speaking of good actors, I really got to give Alfie Allen some credit here. He really just absolutely rocks the stuff with Theon. I mean, he's always been doing a good job with the character, but here he really just seems to take Theon to a completely new level and really just elevates the character. Now, of course, he's got some very, very good writing to work with. I don't think Theon's little speech exactly went down the way it did in the books, but just him saying, my real father died at King's Landing. Robb reminded me that I could never be a Stark simply by existing. Now, granted, the Starks did have their kind of dickish moments towards Theon, but for the most part, in general, they were pretty good to him. And I like how Theon even acknowledges this. He even says that it wasn't really anything Robb specifically did. It was just that he knew he could never be Robb. And that's what really drove him. And he even says that he made the wrong choice in choosing his birth family over his adoptive family. Which is a real interesting thing to say, given that Theon was there as a hostage to ensure his father's good behavior after his rebellion. And just the fact that he says this really just, again, speaks volumes about Ned's character as a man. And even here, again, we get to hear Varys say that how much he admired Ned. But of course, genuinely good people don't have a long shelf life in Westeros. And, no good deed goes unpunished. And Theon's, I don't know if exactly repentance is the right word, but his realization, his admitting, like, wow, I am a complete and utter bastard, does not work out well for him. In fact, we get to see the boy lead him back to the guys, and it's like, hey, here he is, go ahead, get back to torturing him. So it looks like we probably won't be skipping ahead to some of the stuff for Theon's character that happened in book 5 like I thought. I think we might be staying the course in the books, which is okay, but let's just say that where Theon was as a character between this book and where he ultimately ended up going in book 5, I wasn't really a fan of that. The stuff he does by the end of book 5 is really, really cool. Theon as a character to me really makes a comeback in book 5. Spoiler, Theon makes it to book 5. But anyway, that's all stuff to talk about at another day. Okay. So let's see. I suppose now is time to pop up to Craster's place and talk about what's going on there. Again, things here seem to be playing out slightly differently than they did in the books. The main thing that I think they really did here differently that really jumped out to me was it was more focused on the Night's Watch guys fighting each other, while in the books and there is no delicate way to put this, at least in my mind, seem to focus on. And so the Night's Watch guys who were jerks killed the Night's Watch guys who weren't jerks and went off to rape Craster's wives. And Sam and Gilly and the baby ran away. That's basically how it goes down in the books, as best I remember. Here we do get to see a little bit more of this civil war, shall we say, in detail. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I mean, this show, well, it's not exactly spared us on the whole rape is a common thing in Westeros thing. Especially last episode. I mean, here we even get to say, know that there were people who were out there raping 7-year-old girls at Mummer's Ford or whatever that place was called. So, I suppose it's use that sort of thing judiciously, which is really pretty wise. Nothing else to say about what really goes on there. Now, speaking of Mummer's Ford and all that stuff, we get to check in once again with Gedry and Arya and the Hound and all their guys. Looks like they've got a new fella playing Dundarian? Is that how they say that? I barely remember this guy from season 1, so... now, I do like that the Hound is... He's right. All of the points they make, every accusation they level against him, he counters right. He's like, I wasn't there when those soldiers committed those atrocities. I've never harmed a Targaryen. Okay, yeah, I killed that butcher's kid, but I thought the prince told me that the kid had attacked him. What was I supposed to do? I'm not a cop. If the prince tells me that somebody attacked him, it's my job to go off and kill them. So it really does give us some insight into his character and his view of the world. And again, we are reminded, of course, that the Hound absolutely hates his brother. Now, of course, we get to look forward to Trial by Combat in the next episode. Should be pretty cool there. I think it's been a long time since we got to see the Hound really go and get turned loose, so that promises to be interesting. And of course, once again, this all brings us back to the end with Dany and the Unsullied. And it does take a moment to remember that Ser Jorah's dad is Lord Mormont, who we see die in this episode. Remember? How many sons do you have? Bet some of you guys forgot about that. But anyway, that's part of why I'm here. But anyway, as I've said, this scene is just pure gold. There really are no words I can say that can add to the fact that this was just fantastic storytelling, acting, music, CGI, everything comes together, and it is beautiful, wonderful. And like I said, there's really nothing else that I can add to it. That was... Mwah. So anyway, folks, that's all that I have for you this time around. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at HoosierJedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.